Axes. So this video is for educational purposes only. I've just noticed a trend of a lot of creators that make videos about weapons, but they don't actually have any real combat experience. It's a lot of guessing, a lot of book reading, a lot of Mormon Australians who haven't done any actual combat. Not that I've ever had to fight with an axe, but I am a Marine Corps veteran with over 20 years of martial arts experience, and I've also been in licensed security for going on 8 years now. So I do have a lot of experience with weapons training, and actual field use of certain things. I'm not turning my channel into a review channel by any means. However, heathens love axes. There's a reason the arch heathens and our ancestors preferred axes, and they make excellent gifts. Heathens love a good axe. I personally consider myself an axeman. They are also lower cost than something like a sword. Swords pretty much have one use, whereas an axe has a lot more practicality. Swords also, because they're longer, take a lot more pressure. And that's one of the reasons why it's very hard to forge a sword as opposed to an axe. It's a great gift without breaking the bank, right? As I'm recording this, Yule's coming up pretty soon. I thought maybe this would be a good suggestion for those of you looking to buy something for the heathen in your life. And of course, safety is paramount. A lot of axes don't really come with a sheath. I suggest buying one. You can make one. Leatherworking isn't too difficult. An axe in the wrong place at the wrong time can be very unsafe. This axe is named Footslayer. You can only guess why. Basically, I had it in a very bad spot, so I ended up stubbing my toe on this, which cost me about 13 stitches, and I ended up dating a Christian woman. In order to avoid toxic interfaith relationships, I implore you to always have something that you put on the blade when it's not in use. Always treat a weapon with respect. Never swing it at anything you are not willing to destroy. This right here is about an 11-inch razor sharp edge. This is from Cold Steel. Not the most historically accurate shop, but they do make some really good pieces. This is a Dane axe. Cold Steel calls it the Viking axe. But as you can see, it's pretty big. So on to the more practical stuff. Combat axes are actually thinner. You can see the differences in my Dane axe versus this hatchet by CRKT, which has that wedge shape in it. Because this one is thinner, it weighs a little less, so if you're swinging it more often, it's not going to tire your arm out, right? You don't want to use heavy weapons despite what fantasy may have shown you. This, on the other hand, has that wedge shape because that wedge shape is really good at splitting wood. So if you're looking for something a little more fun, a little more combat oriented, something thinner is good. And if you're looking for something a little more practical, you want more of that wedge shape. CRKT actually makes some pretty interesting pieces based on historical inspiration. I don't believe they're too historically inaccurate. As you can tell with the head of this, it's kind of unique. And it's actually got a very square haft, which gives it an interesting feel in the hand. Now the shape of an axe could be pretty useful. You can see this bottom part, the beard here. That can be used for hooking. A guy I deployed with who was in the SCA, something he would do is they would actually have a hand axe and they would hook it onto the shield in front of them, pull them down, and then the person behind them would come up and spear them, which is actually what this tip is really great for. So you'll notice I put the longer tip on the top. There's two reasons for that. One, the longer this hook is, the more you have to go around to pull. And then two, this can also be used as a spear. It's really good for that thrust. So an axe is a pretty versatile weapon and pretty simplistically designed. Typical rule of thumb, the more ornate something is, the more it's probably just a trash wall hanger. All of my weapons are for practical use, whether that's home defense or I use the CRKT to chop wood or poke around the fireplace or whatever. This one's a cane. Again, it's got that long beard, a little more aggressive. This would actually be much harder to hook with because it really doesn't have a whole lot of space in there, and then you got to go around this whole beard. You could probably get a good hook in it. You're probably going to stab whatever it is just because of that sharp incline right there. So this also has kind of a large beard, but you can see it doesn't have that tip on it. Rule of thumb in self-defense, you don't actually want to injure the person, you just want to neutralize them. You want to stop the threat, right? So if I did have to hook somebody with something, I don't want to injure them. I want to injure them as little as possible. Part of that's for liability's sake, and part of it's also, you don't know how much of a threat this person really is, which is one of the reasons in security and also in law enforcement, they will use blunt instruments for less than lethal. But keep in mind, it is called less than lethal for a reason. Any kind of self-defense situation you see yourself in can result in permanent injury or even death. So be very careful. If you're going to train with something, I highly suggest a blunt thing, maybe something polycarbonate. There's actually quite a few shops that sell polycarbonate axes. Cold Steel even has a cane that's a polycarbonate axe, and their stuff, again, is really good to beat the crap out of. And blunt instrument really can be the way to go with self-defense. Something like this is actually really good for trapping. And when you strike, you want to go for meaty portions, don't go for bone. Metal on bone can also do permanent damage. So when you're training to use things like blunt instruments, train to go for those meaty portions. Something else I prefer is the drop down. As you can see on my ritual hammer here, it kind of works the same. I prefer when the haft is wider here and thinner here so that I can take that head and drop it down. There's a couple reasons for this. One is centrifugal force. When I'm swinging, that momentum forces it this way. A lot of modern hammers and axes do this, where they will put the head on the top. They'll shave it down, they'll put it on top, and then they'll stick like a couple of shims in there to expand the wood. And by doing that, you've just created cracks in your wood, which can weaken the haft. It might have that more ergonomic handle that fits better with your hand, but keep in mind the integrity of the haft. It's also much safer. If this thing flies off somewhere, I don't know where it's gonna go. It might destroy an object, might injure a person, but if it just slides down, it's probably just gonna hit me in the hands, maybe cause a little bit of injury. This Dane axe from Cold Steel actually has a screw right in there, and that'll also secure it in place. Now, after I put the head on and it slides down, if you have a metal hammer, it's good to have some kind of cloth to maintain the integrity of the wood, and then I simply pound it into place. Yes, this Warhammer does work because it has a flat face. Cold Steel no longer makes the ones with a flat face. Now it's got some weird waffle face thing. For the flat face, because I use this thing as an actual hammer all the time, just keep tapping it in and eventually it'll be pretty secure. And after doing that, I have not had a head come down. It would be better to use like a rubber mallet, but like I said, you could put a cloth in between in order to soften the blow a little bit and maintain that integrity of the wood. And lastly, metals. I'm not really that technical on metal quality or anything. There's a lot of numbers there, a lot of math, a lot of engineering stuff that I am not privy to. One thing I will say though is a lot of wall hangers will be made out of stainless steel. Stainless steel is high in chromium and it is brittle. It's great for cooking utensils, pots, pans, that sort of thing, because it won't rust, so the maintenance is a lot less. However, it's brittle. Something like an axe might be able to take it, maybe not something this size because it's still got these tips out here that need to be able to take the pressure. But any kind of long blade really should not be made out of stainless steel. It will snap on you. There was one time I was swinging a sword around when I was a teenager. It just snapped on me from just swinging it like this. That was it. So you want to be mindful of what the product is actually made out of. When you're storing the weapon, again, make sure it's got that safety bit on it. You don't want it to accidentally fall on anybody. I keep all my weapons in secure locations. I have a child in the house, so it's either locked away or it's too high for him to grab and not in any kind of space where it's gonna fall down and hurt anybody. And it's also good to oil the blade and clean them every now and then. And they're all pretty dirty because they have seen some use. Interestingly enough, a little bit of cooking oil can actually help the metal. But after you oil it, you wanna make sure it's covered because that oil is going to attract dust and other bits that you didn't want on there. That's pretty much it for axes. Simple weapon, cheap, easy, good Yule gift. If you get something with a wood haft, it's a lot easier to replace. And if you're crafty, you could actually put runes in it or some other kind of inscription. The square haft of this CRKT right here would actually be perfect to put runes in. And I am planning on doing that at some point. It can also create texture. One of the complaints about having a smooth, straight staff like this is the slippage, which you'll get a little bit. This isn't too bad because I actually sanded down the angles. This has pretty decent grip. So I hope that helps your axe chopping endeavors. Skull!